These armies won wars without spilling a single drop of blood. How did they do it? Imagine a general defeating an enemy without a single sword being drawn, a city surrendering without a fight, or an empire crumbling because of clever strategy rather than brute force. It sounds impossible, right? But history is filled with moments where brains beat brawn, where mind games, diplomacy, and strategy decided the outcome instead of swords, cannons, and bloodshed. Today, we're going to uncover some of the most incredible battles won without fighting and reveal the secrets behind these astonishing victories. Let's start with one of the oldest stories in history, the fall of Jericho. Thousands of years ago, the city of Jericho stood as an impregnable fortress. High walls, strong gates, and soldiers ready to defend every inch. Anyone approaching would assume that a bloody siege was inevitable. But the army of Joshua, according to biblical accounts, didn't attack with weapons or ladders. Instead, they followed a unique strategy. For 6 days, the army marched silently around the city once each day, and on the 7th day, they marched 7 times. Then, at the sound of trumpets and shouts, the walls collapsed. Was it divine intervention? Or was there a clever plan exploiting psychology, fear, and ritual? Even if the exact historical details are debated, the lesson is clear. Perception and timing can break the strongest defenses without a fight. The enemy might surrender or crumble just by feeling their position is hopeless. Fast forward a few thousand years to the art of war as taught by Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese military strategist. Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." These words weren't just theory, they were applied in many real battles. Take the story of King Gujian of Yue and his rival state Wu. Instead of launching direct attacks, Gujian waited, studied, and manipulated the enemy. Through patience, espionage, and psychological tactics, he weakened Wu from within. By the time the armies clashed, the enemy was already defeated in mind and morale. Sun Tzu emphasized deception, information control, and surprise. Sometimes a general could win simply by convincing the enemy that resistance was futile. One of the most fascinating examples in modern history comes from Napoleon Bonaparte, a man often associated with battlefield heroics. Napoleon didn't always charge guns blazing. He understood that wars could be won through strategy, intimidation, and maneuvering. Consider the Austerlitz campaign of 1805. Napoleon faced a coalition of Russian and Austrian forces. Rather than engaging immediately, he created the illusion of weakness, appearing vulnerable. The enemy, seeing an opportunity, overextended themselves. Napoleon then struck at the exact moment of their misjudgment, winning a decisive victory while minimizing French casualties. The key wasn't brute force. It was mind games and psychological manipulation. The enemy fought the battle they thought they wanted, only to be trapped by their own assumptions. Another incredible example of winning without fighting comes from diplomacy rather than armies. During the Cold War, for instance, superpowers avoided direct conflict through a series of strategic maneuvers, bluffing, and intelligence operations. Leaders like Kennedy and Khrushchev managed to avert nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. No shots were fired, yet the battle of wills determined the global outcome. In essence, the entire world became a battlefield without a single bullet being fired. Returning to ancient times, let's examine Alexander the Great and his conquest of Persia. Alexander often used psychological warfare to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. When he approached cities, he would sometimes create an illusion of overwhelming force, spreading rumors and showing his army's discipline and unity. Many cities surrendered before a single sword was raised, intimidated by what they believed they faced. Even generals like Genghis Khan mastered similar strategies. His campaigns were not only about brutal force, they were about fear, reputation, and misinformation. Khan would sometimes destroy only parts of a city, leaving the rest intact, convincing nearby cities that surrender was the only option. His army's reputation preceded them, making battles unnecessary. So what do all these examples have in common? First, they rely on strategy over strength. The most effective leaders understood the power of perception. They made the enemy believe defeat was inevitable, which often caused surrender without a single casualty. Second, they used timing and patience. Unlike the common image of war as constant chaos, many of these victories depended on waiting for the perfect moment, observing the enemy and acting when the psychological conditions were most favorable. Third, they understood human nature. People fear the unknown, overestimate dangers, and often make irrational decisions when under pressure. Clever generals and leaders manipulated these instincts to win without fighting. Let's take a moment to look at a lesser-known but extraordinary example from medieval Europe, the capture of Bologna in 1240. Instead of a siege, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II sent emissaries to the city, offering clever incentives and guarantees for the citizens' cooperation. The city opened its gates without a single skirmish, amazed at the psychological finesse employed. The emperor understood that motivation and negotiation could achieve more than swords ever could. Even in more recent times, we see similar tactics. During World War II, several cities surrendered to advancing Allied forces without fighting due to intimidation and misinformation. The Allies sometimes spread rumors about overwhelming force or strategic positions, convincing the defenders that resistance was useless. Again, brains over brawn, perception over firepower. One may ask, why do these stories fascinate us so much? Perhaps it's because they challenge our understanding of what it means to win a battle. Most of us assume battles are fought with weapons, blood, and suffering. But these examples prove that war is often won first in the mind. By controlling information, exploiting fear, and thinking several steps ahead, leaders could defeat opponents without shedding a single drop of blood. Another interesting question is, how much of this still applies today? In business, politics, and diplomacy, we often see battles won by strategy, negotiation, and psychological insight rather than direct confrontation. The same principles used by Joshua, Sun Tzu, Napoleon, and Genghis Khan echo in boardrooms and political arenas worldwide. Let's return for a moment to Sun Tzu's famous advice. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. It's not just theory, it's history in action. From ancient Jericho to Napoleon's clever manipulations, history shows that the most brilliant victories are sometimes invisible. No one remembers every sword struck, but they do remember when an enemy surrendered without a fight. These stories also leave us with a humbling realization. Humans are often defeated by fear, uncertainty, and clever manipulation, long before physical combat begins. In other words, the mind is the first battlefield, and victory often depends on who controls the narrative. So, what can we learn from all this? History teaches us that battles aren't always won by armies or weapons. They are often won by strategy, patience, and the ability to read human nature. Sometimes the best way to win is to avoid the fight entirely. Now here's a question for you. If you had to win a battle without fighting, what strategy would you use? Could we apply these lessons today, in our lives, schools, workplaces, or even online debates? History is full of lessons hidden in plain sight, victories that seem almost magical. The next time you think about war, remember, the greatest victories often leave no scars, no casualties, only the quiet echo of brilliant minds at work. And who knows, perhaps the next battle won without fighting isn't in the past. It's happening right now, all around us. If you enjoyed exploring these brilliant, bloodless victories, comment below with the battle you found most fascinating, or share one you know about that history forgot. And remember, the greatest victories aren't always the loudest, they're the smartest.